I want to make sure that we recognize everybody. I have a couple of people that I'll introduce after we go through the LPSIC members. So I'm Christina McMahon. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm the director of the Clackamas County Juvenile Department and chair of LPSIC, the current chair. And so Malcolm, how about you? Oh, I think you're on mute, Malcolm.
Technology. Yes, I'm Malcolm McDonald. I'm the Director of Community Corrections.
Great, thanks. Judge?
I'm Ann Leininger. I use she, her pronouns. Glad to be here, Clackamas County Circuit Court Judge.
Thank you. Bruce?
Hi, I'm Bruce Tarbox. I am the administrator of Clackamas Indigent Defense.
Good to have you. And Elizabeth, we wouldn't be here without you, so why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Very nice of you. Elizabeth White, Children, Family, Community Connections. I work on substance abuse prevention for the county.
Thanks. John?
Me?
Yes, John Foote.
Hi, I'm John Foote, the DA in Clackamas County.
Thanks, John. Adam?
Hello, Adam Freer. I'm the Division Director for Children, Family, Community Connections within the H3S department at Clackamas County.
Good. Thanks, Adam. Melissa?
Melissa Earlbaum, Clackamas Women's Services Executive Director and serving as a community-based victim service provider for this meeting.
Great, thank you. Seth?
Hi everybody, Seth Lyon. I'm the District 15 manager for the Oregon Department of Human Services, covering child welfare and self-sufficiency programs and he, him pronouns, which I also put up there in case I forget. So
I can't figure out how to adjust my Zoom. Someday I'll learn that, Seth, but thank you for doing that.
well, I think I get a different name depending on who put up the Zoom meeting. Sometimes it's my email address, sometimes it's just, I don't know.
Yeah. Thank you. Good to have you here. Emily, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. I'm Emily Bro. I'm a citizen of Clackamas County.
Great. Thanks, Emily. Good to have you here. And Eric?
Eric Barrera. I'm with Oregon Youth Authority. I supervise the Clackamas Field Office.
Great. Good to see Eric. We also have a couple of guests that I invited because they're going to be hopefully participating in this next conversation we have after we approve our minutes, the Advancing Racial Equity and Public Safety Work Group. So the first person is Alice Perry. Alice, if you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good morning, I'm Alice Perry, Juvenile Services Manager at the Juvenile Department.
Okay, thanks. Good to have you here. And Truls?
I'm Truls Neal, the new Assistant Director, and I use he and him pronouns, and I'm glad to be here. And hi, John Foote, good to see you again.
Been a long time.
It has.
What, 20 years?
12. May have felt like that to you, but it's only been 12.
But it couldn't be 20 because I came 20 years ago and you were already here.
Yeah.
Right, so
It's nice to see you, Truls.
You too.
It's funny how time flies, isn't it? Well, I wanted to have Truls here today also, not only because the agenda item, but because he is our new assistant director. And many of you know Mark McDonald, our current assistant director. He's retiring on January 14th, and Truls and Mark are overlapping. And I'm sure most of you will end up crossing paths with Truls after Mark ends up going on to the next chapter of his life. So good to have you here as well, Truls. Thank you. All right, do we have any? Oh, and I want to take a moment to thank, we have our two colleagues from Public and Government Affairs. Scott, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Scott Anderson with PGA.
Great, thanks for helping us out with the technical pieces today, Scott. And Garrett, did you want to go ahead and tell everybody who you are? Oh, he might have stepped away.
Christina, I see that we have John, he said he's not sure his video is working, but he is on. So I'm not quite sure what's going on with his technical.
Oh, Chief Schmer.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, looks like.
It looks like he's, yeah, I can see his screen.
This is
Okay.
Garrett. He joined as an attendee, so I moved him over if he needs to be.
Great.
I
Thank
can.
you. Chief Schmerber, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you for being here.
Okay, I think I just figured it. Sorry, I'm computer illiterate sometimes, so my apologies.
No worries. Okay, so we've got everybody here, and thanks. Good to see you, Chief. We can see you now. So the next item that we have on the agenda is to approve our minutes from July 27th. There are a couple of messages. Looks like Melissa put a message in for me that we need an amendment. So before we move to get somebody to move to approve them, let's go ahead and have discussion. Melissa, did you have a specific area that you wanted to point?
No, yeah, it's not actually the minutes from the last meeting. It's just at the last meeting we approved, I think it was the March minutes, before I realized that I wasn't listed as an attendee but had attended that meeting. So I don't know if we have to go back and amend that, or if we can just include it in this meeting minutes, or however you want to do that.
Yeah, why don't we just go ahead and include it in this meeting's minutes? Does that make sense, Elizabeth? I think that's probably the easiest thing. Okay, thank you.
Did she say that she was there but not there, or she was there and she wasn't counted? I didn't catch it. Sorry.
I was at the March meeting, but it's not listed in the March
Okay,
minutes.
got it.
Okay, we'll get that.
Christina?
Yeah.
Can I just interject for 1 second? I just want to make sure that everybody knows what meeting they're at, including the attendees, and in case anybody wants to make a public comment later.
Sure, that's great.
So, okay, great. So again, my name is Scott Anderson. I'm with Public and Government Affairs. Today we are here for the local Public Safety Coordinating Council meeting. Christina McMahon, the Juvenile Department Director, will be chairing this meeting. And I want to let you know that we will be taking public comments at approximately 1:20 p.m., if not sooner. And I'll prompt any members of the public on how to make comments at that time. People will also have the option to send in a question or comment via email, and we can go ahead and read those. And so I'm going to share my screen here 1 second. So if you would like to send in a comment via email, send an email to clacconews@clackamas.us. That's clacconews@clackamas.us, and we will read those questions or comments at the end of the meeting. If you do have a comment or question that you'll be asking in this meeting, we do ask that you provide your name and keep your comment to less than 3 minutes. So with that being said, I'll now turn it back over to Christina.
Great. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate you making sure we're all in the right place. Sure. And where we need to be.
No problem.
Thanks. So we were, okay, so Melissa, thanks for clarifying about the correction that we will note in these minutes for today's meeting. Does anyone have any corrections or adjustments for the meeting minutes from July 27th that were sent out by Elizabeth?
Well, Christina, it's a little bit of tease, I guess, the conversation we've got next on the agenda, but I was just looking about the section about the work group, and it the minutes kind of reflect that I wanted to have a conversation about systemic racism. And I think my comments, are, at least as they've shaped up later, but I thought my comments that day were more along the lines of having a work group to kind of start the process of assessing to the extent to which our system locally, is impacted by systemic racism more so than having a kind of a general conversation. So it just looked a little bit broader than I think I intended it when in terms of how it looks in the minutes.
Okay, do you have so I'm glad you brought that up then, so thank you. Do you have suggested language change? I'm looking at where it says other discussion towards the top of page 6 of the minutes, and there's a line here where it says, about 5 lines down, Seth proposed starting a conversation on systemic racism do you want us to alter that maybe to say, starting a conversation on assessing the impacts of systemic racism, or what are you
Yeah,
thinking?
I think basically it was two different comments that got pulled together, which obviously happens in minutes, but I think this is important to be clear. So I think I reflected that we had a conversation in the March meeting about systemic racism, and then I was proposing we look to, follow that up with a work group to look at the extent to which that's showing up in our work here and be able to bring back some
I
recommendations.
have to say, I do not accept the concept that we have systemic racism in our criminal justice system in Oregon or in Clackamas County. I'm not to say there isn't racism, but I find that, as somebody who's worked in this system for a long time, I find that assumption offensive. So I would like to start with a conversation about what evidence do you have that it's systemically racist? And let's look at data and have an honest, and these are difficult conversations to have, but I think we should not march right to the assumption that it was systemic racism without that first conversation.
So John,
I won't be around for it, but I'm telling you.
John, could you maybe hold those thoughts for the agenda item? All we're
Sure,
trying to do right now is make sure that the
Okay.
meeting minutes reflect what Seth said back in
Okay.
July. And what you just said, I think, is really valuable for the next part of our conversation on the agenda. So,
Okay.
so,
'Cause I've looked at it quite a bit.
Hey,
to see if
Seth,
there is.
I remember it being worded, and I could be wrong. I remember it being worded as looking at how our systems support equity and inclusion. And I don't know.
Yeah, I do recall it that way too. I can't remember exactly because then we had John and I had some conversation after that, which we'll talk about. And then, so I've had some additional conversations after that, but I thought on the day it was saying we did have a conversation, the presentation from Sanjay Moore about systemic racism and criminal justice overall. And that I felt like bringing that agenda item, called us to taking a look at what does our system look like in that context. Not to make any assumptions, like John said, but to take a look at it and see where we're at.
It's a hard conversation.
Yeah, I think we said that too. But anyway, just that's how I remember it. So
okay, so that sentence that I was reading before, to me, it seems like that's the sentence that needs to be modified. Do you agree, Seth? I don't
Yes.
want to put words in your mouth. Okay. So what if we changed it, because I do remember what you brought up, Emily. What if we changed it to Seth proposed starting a conversation to look at how our systems support equity and inclusion in public safety in Clackamas County? Is that, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Does that sound like it?
that sounds like what I was thinking. I never know what I exactly said. It looks like John wanted to add, because I know John was right there with the conversation.
I don't mind the question, is our system systemically racist? I don't think that's a bad question to ask.
I agree wholeheartedly, and I think we have an obligation to look at it too. Look at the data, look at where we're going, what we're doing. Are we delivering as Clackamas County, which I think we're all agreed to that we really want to focus on the county. Are we delivering equitable quality service to all our community members throughout the county? And if so, great. If not, what changes can we make depending on what discipline you're working in?
Great. Okay, so Elizabeth, does anyone else have any comments, additional comments? I just want to help Elizabeth try to capture what we're going to settle on here for the change.
It'll be a really long run-on sentence.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing is, other than that section, most of the rest of this talked about sort of the logistics of it. If we change that sentence, Seth proposed starting a conversation to look at how our systems support equity and inclusion in Clackamas County. If you insert that, I think the rest of it still stands. Does that make sense to folks?
Yes, that was at least my recall of what we were intending to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
And of course, mindful, just by raising it in the minutes, I'm just trying to get those accurate. I don't mean to start having the conversation. I understand the temptation to do
I
it.
think it's a good thing to talk about.
I just want to make sure we're getting the minutes right, so we're at least starting from the start.
Yeah. Sorry.
So, Elizabeth, do you have that? I think that's the only change we're suggesting. Are you good with that? Okay, great. So are there any other changes in the minutes that we need to make?
Can I just add one, sorry to add one thing, because my recall is we did have a discussion about diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think that was, some of the focus was on diversity.
Okay, so we can just insert the word diversity there. That makes sense. Thanks for bringing that up. And please don't be sorry for making sure that our minutes are correct. I really appreciate that everyone's taking this.
We got a lot of lawyers on here, so we tend to do this to everything.
Okay, any other sections or portions of the minutes? It doesn't have to be this one. It can be this one. Anything else that we need to change?
Yeah, I sent Elizabeth some really minor, insubstantial corrections to my introduction on page 1.
Oh, okay. Okay, so did we get your name wrong or something? Because that wouldn't be minor. I'm kidding, Adam. I think we got your but were they just kind of typos, just for the record?
In some cases, some slight correction, being a little bit more specific and accurate.
Okay.
Is my description.
Oh, okay. Well, so you're the expert on your history much more than the rest of us are. So, or maybe Rich was, since Rich isn't here, I can say that. Okay. Does anyone want any other changes before we move on? Okay. Does anyone want to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make it now.
Okay.
I'll second it.
So Seth, you made the motion and Malcolm, you're seconding it? Was it Malcolm?
Oh, it was John.
Oh, it was John. Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? All in favor? Maybe just raise your hand. Okay, anyone who can vote not in favor? Okay, so those pass. All right, well, it is, so I've got a question. It's 12:23. I had intended that we would move right into the discussion about the work group that we started to discuss, and it's a very important discussion, but I am concerned about losing folks because of other commitments. So I'm wondering if people would be okay with changing up the order of the agenda and doing the election of officers now, because I know that Judge Leininger has already shared she has to be in court at 1 o'clock. So is anyone opposed to changing the order slightly? Anyone have any concerns? Minutes and the election are the two major agenda items that require a quorum. So that's part of my reason for wanting to make sure that we have a quorum and we don't start losing people. Okay. So John, hold those thoughts, everyone else, and we'll get to that next.
What thoughts?
Okay, so
On 70, those thoughts disappeared.
Okay, thanks. So a couple of years ago, we spent a lot of time and energy going through the bylaws and updating them with the help of Assistant County Counsel Jeff Munns. And according to before, we didn't have any provisions around officers and elections and timeframes really. So in the bylaws that we adopted in March of 2018, we did put a section in the bylaws that were then later our suggested bylaws, which were approved by the Board of County Commissioners later. We did put a section in that talked about the terms for officers. So in our bylaws, it says that we are actually, let me read this to you. The officers of the LIPSIC shall be the chair and vice chair and such other officers as the council may determine to be necessary. Officers shall be elected by majority vote at the last regular meeting of the year. And our terms, officers of the LIPSIC shall serve for terms of 2 years and are eligible for re-election. So I have been in this position since April of 2017. I was nominated, and then nobody else was nominated. So I ended up becoming the chair of LIPSIC. And so I've been in this role for about 3.5 years. So I need to move on and let somebody else take over the role of chair. Rich Swift is not here right now. He's in the role of vice chair. And I know he's been in that role for at least 2 years, but I'm not sure of the exact date. So I haven't, I apologize to folks. I just got back today from being out on medical leave and didn't have a chance to talk with folks and really get into a lot of in-depth conversation about who might be interested. My hope is that if we can just go ahead and start with the chair position, that's what we did last time. If anyone would like to make a nomination for a new chair, please go ahead and raise your hand and I'll call on you. And if no one makes a nomination, I'll go ahead and speak up, but I don't want to do that until I give other people an opportunity. So,
Christina,
yes.
I'm not speaking up with a nomination at this stage, but I'm asking eligibility for chair. Are you already required to be a member at this time to be eligible? I assume. Okay.
Yes, you have to be a voting member of LIPSIC to become the chair or the vice chair.
And I forget, are there agency, like with some of our committees, we've got like one from one agency or one from another type of agency, or is it all members are eligible?
All members are eligible.
Okay, thanks.
All voting members are eligible. Okay. Any other questions about the requirements? It's okay to nominate yourself too. So if you don't want to nominate somebody else and you'd like to nominate yourself, you're allowed to do that. There's no rules against that.
Never seen that done. That's sort of a new approach. That's more Donald Trump approach.
And we can call the election ourselves too. So the other thing is, no, I don't need to say that. So anybody have a nomination? No? Okay, I would like to nominate Malcolm McDonald to be the next chair of LIPSIC. Malcolm has.
Second.
You second it. Okay, well, thank you.
Or he can say anything.
Well, we haven't actually voted yet. He can still say something, but I have worked closely with Malcolm over the last 4.5 years that I've been with the county, and he's been in his position and a member of LIPSIC. I think it's coming up on 2 years now, right, Malcolm? 2? Time flies when we're having fun. But I just think that Malcolm would do a very good job and is very detail oriented, as I know from him helping me out with several projects over the last 4.5 years. So I would like to nominate him. John already seconded that.
Sorry to jump the gun.
Malcolm, are you willing to accept that nomination?
I didn't even get a chance to, not accept it. No, I'd be honored to accept it, Christina.
Is there any discussion, thoughts, comments from anyone else?
And so I know Malcolm has, because of his role in the services that we fund through here, he's got to recuse for those conversations where he's presenting. Otherwise, is that complicated because he's the chair, or is it just turn it to the vice chair during that time? Or
no, he he has to decide whether or not he has a conflict of interest. I've actually spent a lot of time over my 3.5 years talking to Jeff Munns about conflicts of interest and what constitutes one. So that's up to each individual member to declare if they have a conflict of interest. And I think Malcolm has a pretty good track record of demonstrating his ability to discern when he does. So no, it doesn't impact. There have been things that involve juvenile that I've had to not vote on. I've recused myself over my time with LPSC as the chair. So I think almost all of us at various times have the potential to have conflicts. So I don't see that as an issue, but a good question. Okay, are we ready to vote? Why don't we, Elizabeth, because it's a vote, can you go ahead and go through our roster like that we talked about, just to make sure that we get everybody's vote? See, can you call on people?
Yeah, I'll call on people. And Chief, I always get your name wrong, so why don't I call on you first?
Yeah, Chief's fine. John Schmerber. Yes, he's got a yes vote for me.
All right, thanks. Bruce,
Yes.
how do you vote? Or I see a voting member. I'm sorry, I don't have that up. Yes. Sorry. All right. And Seth
Yes.
and John Foot.
Yes.
All right. And Judge.
Yes.
All right. And Melissa. Is Melissa a voting member too? I don't have the list up in front of me. Okay. And do you say yes? Sorry, Melissa, I didn't.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks. And then Adam.
Yes.
All right. And is Eric a voting member too? I don't have enough
No,
windows open.
Eric, just for clarification, Eric is a member of LPSC, but he's a non-voting member according to statute. That's not some weird Clackamas County rule. That applies to all the LPSCs in the state. So, but we're very glad that you're here, Eric.
Yeah, thank you. And then Emily's a voting member too?
Yes.
Okay.
Nice. Yes.
Okay, yes. All right.
And thank you, Malcolm.
Yeah. And then does Malcolm get to vote for himself?
Yes.
Okay, Malcolm, do you vote for yourself?
Yes.
All right. And
Well,
then
he'd be
Christina.
outvoted if he said no.
And then I guess we have to do it officially. Christina?
Yes, vote for Malcolm.
All right. I think that's everybody on my screen. Scott, let me know if I didn't capture everybody.
Thank goodness that wasn't awkward.
Yeah, I know this is why elections are so fun and we delayed doing them. Okay, so the vice chair position, do we have any nominations for the vice chair? Rich isn't here. I was hoping he'd be here by now. We could always renominate him while he's not here. I don't know, I'm kind of tongue in cheek saying that. I don't know what his position is on keeping on as the vice chair, but
Awkward to nominate
have any
somebody you haven't
nominations?
talked to about it. But I'd vote Chief Schmerber. I haven't talked to him about it. I think it'd be good to have somebody from law enforcement.
Great.
Yeah, I've gotten to get to know the chief a little bit. As part of the process of the conversation we're about to have, and just an amazing thinker in addition to, about law enforcement issues and needs of the community and how to really, measure it and talk about it. And so I think, that'd be a great leadership for us. So sorry, John, I know I didn't ask if it was okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I've never done that before. I was kind of looking down at John to see
I
if
was
he,
thinking about it. So since you stuck your foot in it, I thought I'd go for it.
the second, isn't it? Is that a second, Seth?
It is. Sorry.
Well-
about that. You can get me later.
So Chief
He has
Schmerber,
arrest power.
thank goodness for Zoom, right? Chief Schmerber, are you willing to, do you want to go ahead and accept that nomination? Do you want to be our vice chair?
I'm not quite sure what that entails. But I'd like to know that right up front and remind Seth that he's getting the next round of golf.
You have to keep track of Malcolm,
Right.
which is
So
not that hard, really.
the duties of the vice chair are 2 lines in our bylaws, and it says, during the absence, disability, or disqualification of the chair, the vice chair shall exercise or perform all the duties and be subject to all the responsibilities of the chair. So one of the main responsibilities is if the chair is not available to preside over the meeting, the vice chair steps in and presides over the meeting. Direct the preparation and distribution of agendas for all council meetings, vote on all questions before the council, call special meetings of the council in accordance with these bylaws, appoint committees and chairs thereof, sign all resolutions or other documents arising from formal council activities, represent the council in all conferences or activities involving interorganizational or intra-organizational planning and coordinating, shall function as the official spokesperson for the LIPSIC in correspondence and with the media, and perform such duties as may be directed by the LIPSIC. Those are the duties of the chair. So if something happens to the chair, then the vice chair takes over. In the 4.5 years I've been here, I think we've only had 1 meeting where somebody else the vice chair had to cover the meeting. So you never know what the future brings, as we've all
Sure.
learned from 2020, but that's pretty much it.
Well, Malcolm looks pretty healthy, at least via Zoom. So that's good. And I'd be honored. And thank you. I'd be honored to serve.
Great. Well, anyone have any more discussion, or should we go ahead and vote? Anyone? Any final comments?
I move for the vote.
Okay, so Elizabeth, does anyone, just in the interest of time, does anyone who have to abstain or have a nay vote? If you do, can you raise your hand? Okay.
Sorry, I was scratching my head. I was not raising my hand.
I was gonna say, after you made that nomination, John, that would be a little counter. Okay, so if you vote aye, can you raise your hand? So I vote aye. I'm just making this easier for you, Elizabeth. Okay, and Chief, okay, good. That's great. All right, so the nomination of Chief Schmerber unanimously passes. Thank you so much for your willingness to do that, Chief. Really appreciate it. And we know you'll do a great job if for some reason Malcolm isn't able to. So thank you. All right, so we got through that, and thank you. I'm glad that Judge Leininger could be with us for that. And we will move on now to the next agenda item, advancing racial equity in public safety work group. So Seth, I'll turn it over to you. I know you're going to give us an oral update, and I did invite, as I said, Alice to be here because she was part of the meeting that you held, Seth, and I thought it might be nice for you to have other members of the work group here if you needed them to share their perspective. And also Truls has expressed an interest in being on this work group if you are soliciting additional members for the work group. So that's why they're both here today. So go ahead, Seth. I'm turning it over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Christina. So I'll give a little bit of an update about where we are. We're not as far as we would like to have been, but 2020 and trying to manage a local district of a state agency in 2020 is a very distracting task. So some things get kicked down the schedule a little bit, but I think we haven't had a conversation with I think enough of the full work group, and I want to clarify that to be able to move forward. So just to reset, what I'd asked Christina for time on the agenda last time, it was really following up from that conversation in March when we had that excellent presentation about systemic racism in criminal justice systems. And the intersection of that and the events of this year, you know, I wanted to bring that topic to the group and say, should this group be taking on the idea of just shining a light on any places where our system isn't working for everybody? And I kind of liken it to any other area of public safety, where if we find one group's experiencing a lack of safety and disproportionately, we would address it. And so just to, you know, to commit to identifying any places where there isn't, you know, equity in public safety, that we'd bring it back to the group and the group would take it on appropriately. And it was sort of as far as I thought about it. And we had a good group of volunteers to talk about, you know, to have that first conversation, which I believe included also Melissa and Bruce. And I didn't actually see from the notes somebody from the DA's office. And John, I didn't think you were at that meeting. It might have been the other John. I think you have to be John to be DA in Clackamas County, apparently.
At least
it does seem, you know, really important to have. It doesn't, you know, I think like Christina sent Alice, I think it would be appropriate, you know, given that.
I'd like to be on that if there is room and you don't have a judge member already.
I believe you did volunteer last time too, as well, Judge.
Okay.
So thank you so much. So anyway, a couple of I did have some conversation with John about the idea of co-chairing it, because I felt like bringing the shared lens of human services and law enforcement directly to co-chairing this group, I thought was really powerful, and John was willing to do that. You know, we had enough conversation just to frame up initially what we wanted to accomplish, which was to identify a goal statement. What does it look like to make sure that there is equity across our community and public safety, that there aren't disproportionalities that we need to address? And what are the existing data that we can pull in without creating, you know, something brand new, just for bandwidth purposes, to inform that, to make sure that we're making that decision based on facts. And so a small group of us had a conversation. I know scheduling is kind of a nightmare, so I didn't think, and the wildfires intervened, and of course, we should get too far down the road without a more diverse group of disciplines at the table. So I think we had Alice representing juvenile justice, was great. Elizabeth was there. Chief John Schmerber was there, and Adam Freer was there. But notably missing were you know, community-based provider. I know Melissa, I think, you know, can really represent that role. And then the DA as well as defense. So it felt like we should, you know, come back and kind of clarify who's got the time and bandwidth. And then I'm probably going to need some help figuring out systemically how we get a schedule where folks really can be there to have that conversation. So that's what I recall, but I'll put it out to those who are also there. Sorry, Bruce, go ahead.
I had gotten called to Salem on that day, but I had have some discussion with our people, and there was a recommendation from my board at CIDC that Priscilla Bunting from the courthouse, who runs she's the specialty court coordinator, would perhaps be a good addition or resource for this group because she's well hooked into a lot of these communities.
I think that is a great idea. She's going to be at drug court staffing in 15 minutes, and I'd be happy to float the idea with her. And that might be, since we want to have we probably want to have a diverse group being part of this conversation. If it were better to have her from the court than me, then I would absolutely be on board with that.
Can I just say, I think that having diverse perspectives is obviously really important, especially with this topic and this conversation. And I think the perspective of a judge is a unique perspective considering the position of authority that judges are in, Your Honor. So I don't see it as being duplicative or overly representative of the court, because the roles, it sounds like, you know, what you're describing that Priscilla has, or you did, Bruce, and what you have, Judge, are very different roles. So I think it's better to start out, if we have people that want to participate in this, I think it's better to start out with a little bit of a larger group, knowing that people get busy. And like you said, Bruce, sometimes you get called away at the last minute to deal with something else, or we have a wildfire and somebody can't be there. And I think for this work group, being as inclusive as we can is better. And I understand you can't have a meaningful work group if you have 500 people on it, but I don't think we usually have a problem with having so many volunteers that we can't manage it. At least that hasn't been my experience so far in Clackamas. So anyway, those are just some of my thoughts.
Can I ask what the goal is? Is it to have a conversation, or is it something else?
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, no, I was going to ask Seth or Chief Schmerber or Alice, whoever was at that was what your initial, and Elizabeth was there too. Your initial meeting was really to talk about what the goals were. So I'm going to ask Seth or the Chief to talk about that.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from Adam and Chief Schmerber and Alice, who are also in the conversation. But just to briefly answer your question, John, is we didn't feel like we could really articulate the goal without a bigger room. That, you know, that we were too unrepresented of a group. But we, you know, we sketched out some initial ideas around making sure that there is equity in public safety, but articulating it beyond that was, we wanted to get more people in the room. But John, you can fill in your thoughts, because I'm sure I'm missing something.
No, I think, Seth, I think that's pretty accurate. I think what our focus is on is Clackamas County, and I think we agreed to that, and focus on, you know, what services are we delivering, what are our accomplishments up to this point, how are we delivering that service, get that data, and make some determinations or recommendations if something needs to change, what that is, and helping identify that. It's about the conversation. It's about second guessing ourselves, I guess, and double checking ourselves on what we're doing and how we're doing it. And, you know, as we did this, and that's what I had to say, John, for that. If you're asking for goals, we haven't developed them, but kind of the framework about how we move forward was the thought process behind that. But with regards to the judge attending with someone on the court, I think the more people in positions with different roles and responsibilities is very important. I think, Christina, you hit that on the money. I think my lens from law enforcement is different than a judge's lens. Is frankly probably different than the DA's lens, or Bruce's lens, or any other lens. We all are seeing things maybe a little bit different, and I think the difference in opinion is what's important for us to listen to and shape, and to ensure that Clackamas County is, you know, leading the way or providing the best possible service we can. And because it's, at the end of the day, it's about our communities.
Thank you. The reason I asked is that being an old fogey like I am, I've been on lots of these things, and not necessarily just about race. And it occurs to me that in the beginning, being clear about what the goal is, you can change it once you get into it. But let's just say there are people who come to it who think they want change. And there are people who come to it and they want dialogue. And then it's dialogue. The people who want change will disengage because the assumptions under which they came aren't being met. So that's one thought. And then, so being clear in the beginning, let's start with just being a dialogue. Then people go in knowing it's about talking first. And then I have one other suggestion, which is It's been our practice when people say things about the system to go see what the data shows. Because if it's true what somebody's saying, and these days it's mostly critical, then it's something we ought to look at. So I'll give you an example. A few years ago, the Public Safety Coordinating Council, the Criminal Justice Commission in Salem, produced a report that said that there was really bad overrepresentation of African Americans in drug possession cases. And generally, and they included data from Clackamas County. So I didn't know what that meant. So I asked them to come up and do a PowerPoint on just Clackamas County. And I had our whole leadership team, all the senior deputies, everybody in there. Okay, what is this? And we had about an hour presentation, about 45, and people were bewildered by it. So I thought that was constructive, but so then I said, well, it is not that many cases. It's like 60 cases. So let's actually get the names of the cases and look at them. So we did. We got them from Criminal Justice Commission, and then we looked at them and we kind of organized them by kinds of cases, traffic stops, or by a minority group. And then we wrote a report and we published it and put it on our website. And I gave it to all the chiefs and the sheriff and said, hey, this is what we found. And there were some interesting things, some one way, some the other way. First of all, it was a very small group of cases, so you have to be careful. So that's what we did. And then a couple of years later, we did it again. And the number of drug cases with minorities had shrunk a lot. Now, I don't know if there was a correlation in practice or something else, but that would be an example of, okay, if somebody believes something, let's check, rather than just believe it. Because it's tricky in criminal justice. Outcomes may show something, but it may not be a result of racism. So it's hard to do this without, you have to have a lot of trust among everyone. But anyway, I throw that out as, so somebody says something about the system, well, let's go check. Let's go see if that's true.
I think, when
Anyway, that's a suggestion.
Yeah, when the chief and I were talking initially, I think that was absolutely, I don't just want to speak my recollection of the conversation. You can jump in, but that, when we look at national data or we look at state data, that's not what we want to try to tackle. We want to try to tackle what's really going on locally. And in that respect, I think, as hard as these conversations are for some folks, I don't think we have anything to fear. We'll find disparities where we find them, and we won't find them where we won't find them. And, and I think the responsibility to look and make sure it is on us that, if we find areas where there aren't disparities, that's fantastic. Let's tout that. Let's be really clear. We find areas where there are disparities. Let's do a root cause and figure out where they're coming from. And so that's how I felt about our conversation. Anything you would add, Chief?
No, I think that's right on the money. I think what we're going to find, I can just speak for Gladstone, knowing Gladstone and the rest of the chiefs, we're doing a lot of good things out there. There's a lot of good work being done out there, and there may be some stuff that we find that we can do better, but I think, as you self-reflect and you look at things, as you dig deeper, as John said, as you dig deeper and look at the data, you'll either see it or you won't see it, and don't be afraid to share it.
One of the things that is happening within OJD is that the Chief Justice has a strategic initiative, one prong of which is to make sure that to take a look at our practices and our presentation of information in our courthouses to see if it provides an environment that would be perceived as inclusive of, accessible to, welcoming of people of all backgrounds, including court participants, not necessarily in the criminal justice system alone, but to users of our services. And then we're also, I think the whole OJD treatment court infrastructure is using this self-assessment through tool that American University developed to figure out to what extent our programs, our treatment court programs, are representative of our community, create outcomes or have participation that is representative of our community, and things like that, to ask those questions. So I don't see that as, I think that bringing into the conversation some information about work that we're trying to do within the judicial branch could be helpful, and maybe the very purpose of what LPSIC is supposed to be, right? Where we from different disciplines bring forward what's happening in our discipline so that we can be more than the sum of the parts as a system. I think it's a good idea, and I appreciate that it's still being formed.
By the way, those reports we did are on our website if you want to go read them.
I didn't sense that this, the genesis of this group was necessarily criminal justice oriented, but that it was looking at public safety as a whole and just trying to figure out, as a public safety system, are we aware of, or are we including everybody we need to include, or if there are things we're not doing as well with certain communities, and how can we address that? And, but I mean, the thing that comes to mind for me as a participant in the criminal justice system, but is community-wide, is the mental health issues, and how can we address those people out in the community with mental health issues who are of different race or ethnicity or whatever it may be, and are we making sure we're addressing all those people appropriately?
I think that's a really important point, Bruce. And I think what you mentioned about the community, I think we're all players in, and Emily, you're our citizen member, but you work at Coffee Creek. So you also are engaged on a really, as part of your life, with folks who are justice system involved. And I think one area that I would hope this work group could really try to expand on what you just said, Bruce, is how do we bring in the voice of our community and talk about impacts and experiences. I absolutely agree with John Foote when he was talking about looking at data and drilling down data, and that's very important and that needs to happen. But data isn't just numbers and stats in the quantitative sense. Data also involves qualitative data about the lived experiences that people are having in our community. So for example, in our world in juvenile, kids who are disconnected from school and are expelled or suspended have a much higher likelihood of ending up being involved in our system in juvenile, and then moving on to the adult system. So it isn't just strictly, and I'm not hearing anybody say that, but it's not strictly about the people that are being arrested and prosecuted necessarily. It's as a community, as a local public safety coordinating council, we've got some opportunities to engage and involve and listen to the community and figure out how do we get more upstream. Somebody talked about root causes, looking at those things. And that's something that I think needs to be part of the conversation. But I also did want to say, in the interest of time, I know Adam and Alice, you said, I believe, were both at that initial small group that you had. So I think it would really be great to hear from both of them in terms of what your thoughts were when you left the meeting about, okay, what are some goals for this group? So Alice, do you want to go first and then Adam?
Sure. I mean, I think at the group, we were really trying to wrap our head around the scope within the context of LIPSIC, but also kind of hone in on the definitions, because we did talk about the question broadly about the question of systemic racism in particular, but also more broadly in terms of equitable service delivery. I think we also talked about sort of a little bit about what you talked about, Christina, but maybe even broader than that is the lived experience, but also we can look at data and the importance of that, but the perception of what's happening in the community by members of the community is also important and can also impact our systems, our communities, how we interact with each other. So we also need to kind of have those conversations very honestly and openly as we look at the data, as we see where in our systems we're doing well and where we can improve.
Great. Thank you, Alice. Adam, do you have some thoughts?
Yeah, we had an extensive conversation. And a lot of it was around how do we have this conversation in a way that's going to, how do we set it up for success? Because we don't, this was, I think, a lot of I think we had the meeting while there was still a lot of, protests and whatnot going on. So I think the focus was racial. I love Bruce's question though about, wait, what about the other groups that might not be experiencing equity? Because the goal what I wrote down is sort of a draft language of a goal that we had talked about was everyone experiences the same level of public safety, and having it that clear, but then taking a strengths-based approach, like we've been talking about, like, well, what's working? Well, where are some areas that we're doing things well? And maybe even, better than other places. Let's be proud of those while recognizing it's not perfect, and we're going to continue to strengthen it and work on it, and we're going to be very intentional about that. So that, and we want to build on, as Chief said, what's working, what do we know, and let's pool our knowledge, just be highly collaborative, and let's be inclusive. But we didn't want to get too far down the road in terms of formalizing strategies or goals or anything like that, because we recognize that we did need an inclusive process, and we did need to have some key partners at the table that weren't there. So. But yeah, I think I think we're on the same page with what a lot of people are saying.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think that it makes sense to, you started out and you're ending with that, Adam. Seth, you started out with trying to get a bigger representative group and more voices and perspectives to the table to be part of this committee, a work group, which makes total sense. I think that what needs to happen is we've identified a few people today. Maybe we need to have more conversation about that. But I think that the work group needs to get together and talk about, okay, what are the, after this conversation, what are our goals? What is our purpose? I mean, the purpose of LIPSIC is, we have a purpose by statute. We're supposed to be trying to appropriately and effectively address the local and juvenile offender populations, to develop and recommend a plan designed to prevent criminal involvement by youth, to coordinate local criminal justice policy among all criminal justice entities. And this is my favorite part of this, to provide support for programs that strengthen and preserve families. Everything you've all talked about, to me, fits in that well. So I think the group needs to identify a proposal of, here's what we think we should be talking about. Here are the identified goals that we have, and they need to be realistic, and they can be shorter term goals, and then we can build and grow off of. I'm just throwing that out there. And it might be things like John talked about looking at the data. I talked about involving community. It might be goals related to how are we going to do that in a coordinated way. We don't do that right now. There's pockets of where I'm using data now as an example. John has looked at some data in his office. We pull department. I know Seth at the state, child welfare looks at data. I'm not sure, Chief, what law enforcement looks at, but we don't do that in any kind of a coordinated way to try to tell the story of how different groups are being impacted in Clackamas County. And I know, Melissa, you've talked about it in other meetings I've been in with you. You have data that's related to the victims that are experiencing a lack of safety in our community. So I think the journey of 1,000 steps begins with 1,000 miles begins with a single step. I think this group needs to get together, this larger group, and start talking about, okay, what are some concrete goals that we could identify related to our purpose as a local public safety coordinating council. And there needs to be a jumping off place, and then come back to the LPSC and talk about, okay, here's what we're proposing we focus on. That's my take on hearing all of this. Do other folks have, I don't think what I'm saying is counter to what I've heard, but anyone have a different thought about how to address this? To me, it's pulling the people together and having the conversation. You got to start somewhere. But it has to be goal focused. So Seth, you're the lead. What do you think? I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, I think we're just actually getting better and better clarity about, a shared idea to move this forward. So it's good that other people have richer memories of different pieces of the conversations that have happened to date, so we can fill it in, because I'm running on limited brain cells, it seems, in 2020. Just if we can, speaking of that, getting the scheduling down so we can maybe decide on a frequency and a way to do it. I think we're probably going to have to meet at noon if we're going to get the judge. That's been my experience, but I'm always happy to do that, even though a lot of other meetings fall into that time slot because of the same reasons.
Yeah.
Someday I'll have a lunch, but not anytime soon, apparently. So yeah, and clarifying what the support level is for getting things scheduled. I know Elizabeth helped up last time, but even though I'm happy to try to work as hard as I can to help this move forward, I probably can, do I need to draw on support from my agency, or how does that work for?
Well, in the past, when we've had other different committees, ad hoc, we've had a lot of different work groups. We did have the children and families person helping with that. So Elizabeth, I think what we're probably talking about here is scheduling one meeting, probably one meeting a month, or are you thinking, I mean, realistically, what kind of a schedule are you thinking of, Seth? Because I would think if you ask people to commit to having a meeting once a month and giving people things to do in the interim, that's probably more realistic than trying to have a more intense pace than that to start out.
Totally agree.
Yeah. So Elizabeth, could you go ahead and help Seth coordinate that? I think the most important thing is coming up with the recurring meeting time that people are going to be available to attend.
And to clarify, we've got Melissa and Adam and Bruce. You wanted to participate directly, and Judge Leininger, and the chief and myself. Truls is raising his hand. So I wanted to put that question back to you, Christina, because you said the work group has to be 70% LPSC members, and I just wonder if somebody's, essentially representing you. Do they count in the 30% or the 70%?
Yeah, no, that's funny that you bring that up, Seth, because when Jeff Munns did our bylaws, And I remember it was John Foote actually who brought up the 70%. We had a lot of discussion at our LIPSIC meeting about the majority of folks on these committees needed to be members of LIPSIC, so that it wasn't, you know, we had something that went on where we had a work group that very few people were actual LIPSIC members. And there were some concerns about that. So it got brought up, and now I'm going back a couple of years here. But when the actual bylaws were written up, it does not say that it doesn't have the 70% in the set of bylaws that were approved. That was the number we had kind of bantered around in our LIPSIC meeting. So I think that as long as the majority of people are LIPSIC members, you know, so 51%, I think we're fine. So when you talked about, when Judge Leininger talked about, I wrote down, or it was you, Bruce, Priscilla Bunting. I don't know Priscilla, but you know, that's an example of somebody who's not a LIPSIC member. Alice is not a LIPSIC member. Truls, I think you wanted to jump in, Truls, and so why don't we do that now? Because I think I know why you're jumping in. So
I was just asking if I could participate, that's all.
yeah, so Truls isn't a LIPSIC member, but I think, you know, what the volunteers that you have, you still have the majority are LIPSIC members.
And we could, correct me if I'm wrong, but the committee could reach out to community members asking for input regardless of whether they're members or not. So if
exactly
we come across someone in the community who you think has a really interesting perspective that would be helpful to
yes,
the committee and then ultimately the LIPSIC, then they could come in and provide input, I suppose.
yes, I think you're absolutely right, Bruce.
And we coordinate, we help coordinate the Youth Advisory Board. It seems like it'd be appropriate to ask one of those members to participate. We can
Yes.
do that if that's desired. Okay. We'll do.
And Melissa, don't you have a group of survivors that meets there? It might be an opportunity for you to get that voice at the table too. So, I mean, you're only just beginning here, right? Okay, do we, so Truls, yes, I think it would be wonderful if you participate. I'm really grateful that Alice was willing to jump right in, and gratified that so many people on the LIPSIC are willing to volunteer to do this. Is there anything else related to this that we need to discuss, or do you, Seth, have what you need to be able to move forward? With the goal being that in January, when we have our meeting, hopefully your group can come back and you can share with us what your purpose and goals are, even if they're baby steps, as a jumping off place, even if it's a work in progress.
Yeah, I hope we have some overall goal statement and a bit of a initial scope. That would be my hope to get to by the next time we're coming back to this group. So
okay.
That's what we had discussed as a small group. So
great, thanks. So is there anything else related to this we need to talk about, or are we good with moving on?
I don't have anything else.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you. Thanks for everyone's willingness to participate in this. And I think what we have next on the agenda is agency roundtable updates, announcements. I know we haven't really done that on the agenda for a while, so wanted to make sure that we left a little bit of time to, if anyone had something. I was talking to Elizabeth before the meeting started, and she was telling me about something really exciting. Not to put you on the spot, I know we only have a few minutes left before we do public comment, but maybe Adam could give us an update, or Melissa, if you have something to talk about. Seth, you have
I've got 2 minutes worth of a really non-cheery topic, but I do want to get it in. So whenever you.
Okay, well.
Mine's positive. It'll only take a minute, so whenever.
Okay, so.
Christine, I'd like to say something too.
Okay, John too. All right. So
2 minutes or less.
Okay, so we're gonna go speed round. Adam, then Melissa, then John, are you cheery or what are you here? I'm just trying to, I have a theory about a certain type of sandwich and how you stage things, but I won't get into that at the lip sync meeting. So cheery or not so cheery?
You asking me?
Yes,
I
John
don't
Foot.
understand. I'm afraid you lost me completely.
Okay, so let's just do this. Let's go with Adam.
Am I
and
part of
then-
the sandwich?
Yes, yes. So
Oh,
Adam, Melissa, John,
probably call me
Seth,
white bread.
Seth, and then John Foot. So, okay, so Adam, why don't you give us your do you know what we were talking about?
I have a guess.
Okay.
It's a new federal funding award that we just received.
Yes.
It's a COSAP funding stream through Department of Justice, Bureau for Justice Assistance. We worked closely with the DA's office and a lot of other partners. The initial idea was funding for LEAD, for the law enforcement assisted diversion program that we're using to help divert. I think right now it's primarily focused on homeless individuals. So they go to treatment instead of jail. The funding for that was cut due to a lot of the budget cuts. And so, there's a lot of people that were scrambling to say, okay, what can we do to keep this important program alive? And so they came up with the funding opportunity became available, and we were asked to take the lead in that, and we got it. So what we did is we're calling the program LEAD Plus because the majority of the funding is going to fund LEAD. But the name of the funding, the acronym, I won't go through the whole acronym, is it's all about a comprehensive approach to substance abuse. And so what we did is we put on this, added this layer of infrastructure to help create this more cohesive approach, because we were struggling connecting all the dots, because there's a lot of funding coming in, a lot of programming happening that was kind of all starting at around the same time. And so we said, you know what, we need to take a step back and make sure that we're all working very closely together. So we did that kind of behind the scenes to develop the proposed program. And we proposed Elizabeth to take the lead role in that program. So she's going to be helping to oversee this comprehensive approach. And if you know anything about her background, she actually published some journal articles on comprehensive approach to opioid use. So we're very excited to have her available, and she took the lead role in writing the application. And so excited to have her also take the lead role in implementation. So it's a 3-year, $900,000 grant that's, I'm assuming, renewable after the 3 years. So.
Wow. Well, congratulations on that. That's very exciting.
Thank you.
Okay, so Melissa.
Yeah, so 3 quick, very, very quick funding announcements. We also received a grant recently from the Office of Victims of Crime. That's with Safety Compass and A Village for One and Northwest Family Services. And so that's for transitional housing for trafficking victims. So more to come on that. And then also an OVW grant for youth services. And that, again, is for the mobile advocates that we have. But mostly I really wanted to point out, because this will hopefully intersect with this group at some point. We wrote a collaborative grant with Juvenile, the DA's office, the Sheriff's Office, Safety Compass, Parrot Creek, a number of other organizations, Children's Center, around vicarious trauma and the impacts of that on employees, and also as systems as a whole, particularly in the public safety system. So we are one of 12 sites nationally for that grant, and we're still learning more and more about it. But it's $50,000, and that $50,000, because those of us who are helping kind of administer it are not taking anything off that grant. So that whole $50,000 will go towards training, consulting, whatever we want to use it for as a community. So we're hoping to bring on more law enforcement jurisdictions and others as we learn more about the grant as it unfolds. But thus far, a really great cross-section of partners, and hopefully that will provide some additional supports for all of our employees and us as a system. And that's through the International Association of Police.
Melissa, I'm sorry, what that was targeted towards what type of trauma?
So just vicarious trauma within like the public safety systems, primarily for, so anybody all of us, if you will, and all of our organizations. And how to manage that from a wellness perspective so that we can continue to do the work we do and so forth.
Great, very exciting. Thank you, Melissa. Seth.
Kind of a non-jury topic. But I'm saying this because I really, this is a really wide net to cast, and just asking for your help and partnership just to keep this on your radar and communicate this in your networks that, one of the things we have to investigate is child fatalities, where there's a question of abuse and neglect. And over the last couple of years, we have a really fantastic multidisciplinary team. And a number of child fatalities where there really are some questions. And sometimes when we've gotten in there, we've really found more questions than we anticipated, didn't get reported to our hotline. And so by the time they came around to the MDT, maybe they came from the medical examiner, or it was a later report by law enforcement where more information came to light. We've been getting assigned 2, 3, 4, 6 months later after a child has passed to then have to go out and meet with the family. And it's really hard enough when everything's fresh. And sometimes a lot of the evidence, the things we really need to see to do a good assessment aren't there. It kind of drifts off. And so I just want to ask everybody just to be really mindful that, if there is a child fatality, please do have your folks call the hotline. The hotline will decide whether to assign it to us or not, but it never hurts as mandatory reporters to make those calls when we lose, especially a small child, under any circumstances that are remotely suspicious. And particularly, there have been a lot of, unsafe sleep situations that we've lost a lot of small children. It's a fairly epidemic statewide, and certainly has impacted us in Clackamas County. And so as you think about your work and are interacting with families, everything you can do to be preventative in that area. And Adam and I offline from this group I'm still going to reach back out to you, Adam. We're going to do this. It's just 2020 got in the way to really look at what are the other things we can do to prevent these from happening. So anyway, I just wanted to put a plug out there. It's really better if we're there early than we're there later. And it's never a good topic, but if you could, just communicate all through your networks to make sure to get those hotline calls made, that would be very much appreciated. So thanks.
Okay, thank you, Seth. And John, last but not least, what would you like to share with us?
Well, I just wanted to say something. Some of you I don't really know, and some of you I've known for a long time, and some of you in between. But I'm retiring at the end of December, and I wanted to tell you it's really been a privilege in my work, and I've enjoyed working with those of you I know, and maybe people you know. I feel very lucky about it. I want to thank you for your public service. And it's a weird time with COVID, but thank you. And I want to wish you all the best. And that's really it. Thank you.
Well, John, I was going to call out, since you started, some of you who joined us a little bit later, John asked if this was our last LPSC meeting of the year. And I said, well, yes, it is. We meet again in January. And he reminded us all that this was his last meeting. So I'd like to just also acknowledge you, John, and thank you for your service to this county. And you've spent your whole career in public safety. And personally, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have gotten to be the LPSC chair. You're the person who nominated me. So also wanted to thank you for that. But I really am hoping all the best for you as you move on into this new phase of your life and get to spend time with those teenagers. And thank you for all you've done for our county as well. So
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. I was actually chair of this thing twice. That long ago. That was when you'd get elected chair if you weren't at the meeting. We've all been on committees like that.
Yes. I think that we have Scott Anderson, I think we need to make sure to check in with you to make sure that if we have anyone who wants to make any comment.
Yes, that's correct. So now is the time that we'll be taking public comments, and I will share my screen for the email address. So here is our email address. It's clackonews@clackamas.us. If you have any questions you'd like to email in, go ahead and do it now. We currently don't have any questions. But we do have some members, some attendees. If they would like to ask any questions, feel free to go ahead and use the raise your hand option there here in Zoom, and we'll see if anybody has any questions.
I have a question. I posted it actually in the little chat, and it might be something better for the next meeting, but I'm interested in a discussion about how COVID has been impacting our people's involvement in the public safety system. Because I know that we're not sending, our prison intake numbers are down. I've heard that we're not keeping people in jail pre-trial as often as we used to. So I'm curious about what's going on and in other organizations as well, and if we're learning anything that might continue post-COVID. That might be too big of a conversation. I don't know.
There's one thing I could say that, and I'm not going to be around for it, but the backlog of cases that is being created by this is a huge issue. And it's not like these things have gone away. They're just not getting through the courts. So, and that's going to be a huge issue for everyone. We had this same issue back in 2004 when the legislature decided that they were just not going to fund a bunch of stuff. And so the courts announced that they weren't going to process most misdemeanors and a number of C felonies. So they all got charged and postponed for about 4 to 6 months until the beginning of the next biennium. I'm sure we all run our checkbooks like that. So, and we had to come up with a plan to what to do with that backlog. And that's how we came up with the current case manager system, because we didn't have one before. And we made sweeter deals, and the court pushed, and we got the backlog eliminated. But that's not something that's being talked about much, but it's a huge problem. It creates speedy trial problems for defendants. It creates real problems for victims. The fact that these numbers in the jail and prisons have gone down is not a sign that the cases have gone away. So,
my attorneys are currently averaging about double their normal caseload, and obviously a good portion of that is just babysitting cases until they can get them through the system. But it does put a tremendous amount of stress on the attorneys just for additional work and for their staff, and obviously for the clients as well, because they're in limbo. So this is a check that we've written that's going to come due sometime in the future, and we'll see how that works out.
I wish there was some conversation about dealing with this. And I know that people are noticing it behind this. Bruce, I know you said things. I talked to our folks, but there's been no planning. I mean, why? Okay, so the courts, anyway, that's a huge problem.
Yeah.
And it's just getting worse. And it's not getting better by not acting on it. So maybe that's not exactly what you expected, Emily.
No,
that is a real problem.
No, yeah, that's one of, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I guess I'm also wondering if it well, I don't know. We're almost out of time, so but maybe another meeting.
Emily, I'm really glad that you brought this up, and I think it is something that will still be of in our lives and be of interest at the beginning of January. So I'm happy to work with the incoming chair of LIPSIC, looking at Malcolm, and help him with putting together the agenda. This seems like something we should go ahead and address at a future LIPSIC meeting. So thank you for bringing it up.
I think we should have the partners, and I won't be around. It'll be worse in January. So I won't be around, but if the partners could get together and talk out how we could move these cases. I mean, there's some that can't get moved. They're going to have to get tried. But, you know, we only try about 5% of all our cases. So almost every case ends up being negotiated. So why not get that going? Anyway.
Right. So, okay. Well, Scott, thank you, everyone. Scott, did you have anyone who wanted to ask a question or make a comment?
Nope, nobody raised their hand and we did not get any emails. So I'll hand it back to you, Christina.
Okay, thank you.
No
very
one's
much.
listening.
Right. Well, we are at our time. So thank you all so much. I think this was a very good meeting, a lot of important discussion, and excited about our jumping off place for our new work group, and really appreciate everyone's time. And thank you for sharing the things that are going well, and very exciting, Adam and Melissa, about these grants and opportunities that are coming in to our county. And even the things that aren't happy moments are important to bring up here so that we can work more effectively together. So thank you all. And congratulations to the new chair and vice chair. And we will see you on January 4th.
All our condolences.
Yeah.
Depending on your point of view.
Who's the new vice chair?
The new vice chair is Chief Schmerber.
Oh, nice.
Appreciate you guys.
All right. Thank you all.
Hi, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you.